Some betrayals aren't sudden. They sneak in disguised as ordinary moments. Laughter in a crowded room. A glance you almost don't notice. A name casually dropped that shouldn't exist. This is the story of discovering that your world isn't just shaken. It's been quietly rewritten behind your back. And how, when you finally see the pattern, you realize survival isn't about anger or revenge. It's about reclaiming yourself before the game ends. Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me. The first time I suspected my wife was cheating, I wasn't angry. I was embarrassed. I was sitting on the floor of a rented banquet hall, half hidden under a long table covered with a white tablecloth, holding a roll of clear tape in my mouth like an idiot, trying to reattach a loose banner that read, "Congratulations," in gold letters. I wasn't supposed to be there. She was. This was not our party. It was a surprise birthday party for someone I didn't know well, hosted by people I had never met before, in a part of town we never went to. And yet there I was, on my knees, doing unpaid labor, because I'm the kind of man who says, sure, I can help, even when no one actually asked. That's important. I'm a people pleaser, a winner, a professional overthinker, the kind of guy who replays conversations from 5 years ago and still feels guilty about them. So when my wife told me earlier that week, I'm going to a small work gathering on Saturday, nothing big, I believed her. I always do. I believed her when she said I wouldn't like it anyway. Too loud. Too many strangers. You'd be uncomfortable, she said. She was right. Just not in the way she meant. I only ended up at that party because of a stupid coincidence. A mutual acquaintance asked me last minute if I could help with setup. I didn't even know my wife would be there. I figured I'd tape some decorations, grab a soda, leave early, and go home to microwave leftovers alone like usual. Then I heard her laugh. Not her polite laugh. Not the one she uses with neighbors or waiters. Her real laugh. The one she used to have with me, years ago, before everything became quiet and scheduled and emotionally delayed. I froze. I stayed under the table like a coward, heart pounding, listening. Her laugh was followed by a man's voice. Low, confident, relaxed in a way I have never been. Someone who didn't apologize for taking up space. I slowly leaned forward, just enough to see. That's when I saw her go pale. Because she saw me. Not fully, just my shoes sticking out from under the table. The ridiculous shoes she bought me because she said they made me look less sad. Her face drained of color so fast, it was almost impressive. Like someone had unplugged her. She didn't scream. She didn't wave. She didn't come over. She just stared. Then she turned away from the man beside her and said something I couldn't hear. Her hand was shaking. I noticed that because I always notice small things. That's my curse. The man followed her gaze and smiled at me like he knew exactly who I was. That's when I realized something much worse than cheating was happening. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This was organized. And I was the last person to know. I stayed under that table for another full minute, holding my breath, my mouth dry, my thoughts racing in tight, miserable circles. I didn't stand up. I didn't confront anyone. Of course I didn't. I waited. Because that's what I always do. And that decision, staying silent right then, set off a chain of events that blew up 4 marriages, exposed a lie that had been going on for years, and put me face to face with the one person who would change everything next. But I didn't know that yet. At that moment, all I knew was this. My wife had never gone pale when she saw me before. And that hurt more than anything. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until my chest started to hurt. My back was pressed against a plastic cooler, legs cramping, and my hand was still holding that dumb roll of tape like it meant something. Across the room, Odette turned her back. She didn't come over. She didn't signal me. And the man she was talking to, the one who made her laugh like I hadn't heard in years, just kept staring at me. He didn't look away. He didn't even blink. He smiled, like he'd won something. I don't know how else to explain it. It was this slow, smug kind of smirk. Not pity, not curiosity, just satisfaction. As if seeing me crouched under a table was exactly what he expected. Then he leaned in and whispered something in her ear. She didn't flinch. She didn't slap him. She didn't look guilty. She laughed again. And that's when I realized something deeply humiliating. They weren't worried I was there. They were annoyed I was early. They knew I was coming. I scrambled out from under the table, bumping into a chair on my way up, and tried to pretend like I'd just arrived. Like I hadn't been hiding. Like I wasn't unraveling inside. I walked straight to the bathroom, locked the door, Sat on the edge of the tub. That was when I started shaking. Not from anger. Not yet. It was confusion. That weird numb panic when your brain starts assembling pieces of a puzzle you didn't know existed. Why was she here? Why didn't she tell me? Who was that guy? And why did I suddenly feel like the last guest at a party thrown in my honor? But where the joke was me. I stayed in that bathroom way too long. I stared at myself in the mirror and thought, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm just paranoid. Maybe they're coworkers. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. But something in me knew. I left without saying a word. Didn't even look at her again. Just texted an excuse to the party organizer and drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. At home, I sat on the couch, in the dark, waiting. She didn't come home that night. And when she did, the next morning, her excuse was so lazy it insulted my intelligence. I stayed at Camila's. Too much to drink. Camila, a woman who had moved to Austin 2 years ago. She was lying. And I was done pretending I couldn't see it. I didn't call her out right away. I wish I had. I wish I had the kind of personality that explodes, demands answers, flips the table. But that's not me. I just nodded. Okay, I said, like an idiot, while she kicked off her heels and went to take a shower in the house I paid for. I sat there on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. Camila. She really said Camila. I remember helping Camila and her husband load a U-Haul the summer they moved to Austin. She gave Odette a glass jewelry box as a goodbye gift. We still keep Q-tips in it. And now she was using her name like it was some disposable alibi? That was when it stopped being sad and started feeling insulting. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every detail that hadn't made sense before now looked different under this new light. The late nights, the dead phone battery, excuses, the sudden spike in her perfume budget. I had ignored all of it because I wanted to believe we were just in a rut. We weren't in a rut. I was in the back seat of a car someone else was driving. The next morning, I did something I'm not proud of. While she was still in the shower, I checked her purse. Not to take anything. Just to look. Just to know. There was a receipt from a wine bar across town. Not a place we'd ever gone to together. The timestamp said 10:38 p.m. Last night. 2 glasses of Pinot Noir. 1 appetizer. 1 dessert. That didn't scream girls' night to me. So I made a plan. If she was going to keep lying, I needed to hear it in real time. I downloaded an app and bought a cheap mini recorder online. I felt disgusting doing it. But more than anything, I felt small. Like I was already the last to know, and I was just trying to catch up to everyone else. 2 days later, she had another client dinner. I didn't argue. I kissed her on the cheek, told her to have fun, and watched from the window as she pulled away. Then I followed her. I stayed 3 cars behind the whole way. Hands sweating on the steering wheel like I was doing something illegal. But it wasn't paranoia anymore. It was survival. I had to see it for myself. She didn't go to a restaurant. She went back to that same building. The penthouse job. Zayden's place. And stayed there. For 3 hours. When she finally came home, she looked casual. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just rewritten our marriage behind a locked door. I couldn't sleep that night either. But I wasn't crying anymore. I was planning. By Thursday, the guilt of doing nothing had curdled into this dense, bitter knot in my chest. I couldn't focus. I couldn't paint. My students noticed. One of them asked if I was going through a divorce. He's 12. I told him no, but the way the word got stuck in my throat made him squint at me like he already knew. That night, I sat in the garage, lights off, doors closed, listening to the tiny voice recorder I'd hidden in the lining of Odette's purse. My stomach turned the moment I heard the first voice that wasn't hers. It was him. Zayden. His voice was exactly how I remembered it. Calm, smug, like someone who never had to raise it to get what he wanted. He said her name like it was a joke. Odette. He laughed. You're playing with fire. And then, her voice, lower than usual, soft and syrupy. That's what makes it fun. I hit pause. I felt my pulse behind my eyes. I needed to do something with this rage before it turned into something I couldn't pull back from. I opened my laptop and searched for him. Zayden Lark. The last name came from a delivery package I saw outside his door during my little parking lot stakeout the day before. It didn't take long. His face was everywhere. He was a co-founder of a boutique tech investment firm. Rich. Interviewed by podcasts with titles like The Modern Alpha and Leveling Up Without Apologizing. Of course. And then I saw her. In an older interview video on some niche entrepreneur site, There was a woman sitting beside him. She was laughing at something off camera, wearing this emerald green dress that shimmered under the studio lights. The caption said, Zayden and Mira Lark, power couple behind Larkstone Ventures. Mira, his wife. She had that same hyper-polished look as Odette, effortless, elegant, expensive. But there was something different about her eyes. She didn't look easily fooled. I found her business contact through an interior design blog. She owned a studio. Classy branding. Delicate serif fonts. I stared at the contact form for 10 minutes before I typed anything. Then I wrote the message 3 times before I finally sent it. I didn't say much. Just this. I think our spouses are spending more time together than they should. If you're willing to talk, here's my number. Harlan. I expected silence. She called 20 minutes later. Her voice was colder than I imagined. Controlled. But there was an edge to it. Like she'd already suspected something and was waiting for confirmation. I'm listening, she said. No small talk. No pleasantries. I told her everything. Slowly. Carefully. She didn't interrupt. Not once. When I finished, there was a pause. Then she said something that knocked the breath out of me. You're not the first person to contact me about Zayden. Mira didn't sound shocked. She didn't even sound angry. She just sighed, like this had happened before and she was tired of explaining it. I asked her what she meant, who else had contacted her. She hesitated, then said there had been 2 before me. 2 different people, over the last year, with stories that felt almost identical to mine. Their partners had fallen orbit around Zayden like moths to some designer flame, and Mira had quietly collected the pieces. But she hadn't acted. He gets bored easily, she said, calm measured. They think they're special. He treats them like they are. And when it ends, they never see it coming. I felt sick. She was describing Odette without even knowing her name. But Mira wasn't calling to vent. She had a plan. I don't want to hurt your wife, she said. I want to humiliate him. It was the first time I smiled in days. Not out of malice, but because it was the first sentence that made sense. Odette had lied to me. Repeatedly. Confidently. But Zayden, he was orchestrating this. This wasn't an affair. This was a pattern. A setup. And I'd walked right into it. Mira suggested we meet. Somewhere neutral. She picked a cafe that didn't even have Wi-Fi. I agreed, even though every cell in my body told me this was insane. Meeting the wife of the man who might be wrecking my marriage? It sounded like a punchline. But when you've been living in confusion long enough, even chaos feels like clarity. The next day, I called in sick to work. I stared at the mirror, trying to convince myself I didn't look like a man unraveling. But the bags under my eyes told the truth before I could lie to myself. At the cafe, Mira was already there. She looked sharper than in the video. Colder too. She slid a phone across the table. I have recordings, she said. Texts. Photos. Not just with your wife. I blinked. There are more. She nodded. That's when I realized this wasn't about 2 people sneaking around anymore. This was a game. And I was about to learn how many players were already on the board. Mira pushed her phone toward me and hit play. I expected voices. What I heard instead was silence, then footsteps, and then the soft creak of a door. The voices came after that. First hers, low and steady, and then Zayden's, sounding amused, distant, as if none of it mattered. She let the clip play for a while. There wasn't anything vulgar. I wouldn't want that anyway. What was there, though, was worse. It was Zayden talking about me. Poor guy's so out of his league, he said, between chuckles. She told me he cried during a podcast once. A podcast? Mira hit pause. That wasn't even the worst one, she said quietly. I stared at the table, the wood grain blurring. I didn't know which part stung more, that he mocked me like I was some sitcom character, or that Odette must have been feeding him those stories. Personal things. Things she used to protect. I don't understand, I muttered. Why me? Why her? Myra's gaze didn't soften. Because he only chases people who aren't looking. It's a power thing. If you seem too happy, too comfortable, it bothers him. She showed me messages next. Screenshots from Odette's number. She had somehow accessed their conversations from Zayden's synced cloud account. Don't ask me how. The messages were painful. Not just the flirty ones, but the parts where Odette talked about our life like it was some long, boring hallway she couldn't find the end of. She described our marriage as a phase, and me as gentle but slow. Slow. That word echoed. I used to think being gentle was a strength. Apparently, it made me disposable. But then Mira said something that pulled me out of my spiral. I want to end this on my terms. And I want you to help me. I blinked. Help you how? She leaned in. They think we're blind. Let's use that. I didn't answer right away. I didn't know if I could handle whatever she was planning. But something inside me, something buried under years of people-pleasing and silence, cracked open just wide enough to let her words settle in. Because as much as I hated the idea of revenge, I hated being the punchline more. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready. Mira slid her phone across the cafe table like it was loaded. I didn't touch it right away. My hand hovered over the screen, not sure if I was ready to see what someone else's version of my wife looked like. Eventually, I pressed play. The first video was grainy security footage. Zayden's apartment lobby. A few weeks ago. Odette entering alone. Nothing obviously romantic. She wasn't even smiling. Just focused. Like she was heading into a meeting, not a secret rendezvous. But behind her, just a few seconds later, walked another woman. Different outfit, different energy, playful, arms swinging. The timestamp showed they'd arrived nearly together. This is Alice, Mira said. She was number 2. I gave her a confused look. She was the second person to tell me something was going on. Months ago. I didn't believe her at first. I thought maybe she wanted attention. Or revenge. Then she showed me a screenshot, a message thread between Zayden and Alice. Flirty. Then demanding. Then cold. And finally, blocked. He cuts them off, Mira continued, stirring her untouched tea. When they start asking questions. It's a pattern. He keeps them close, flatters them, makes them think they're essential, and then drops them the second they step out of line. I asked why Odette would get involved in something like that. My voice cracked when I said her name, like just speaking it made me sound weaker. Myra's response was immediate and direct. She probably thinks she's the exception. They always do. That hit me harder than anything so far. Because she was right. Odette has always needed to feel chosen. Important. Like she was above the mess of ordinary life. And I guess I'd stopped making her feel that way. Somewhere between the laundry and the leaky faucet, I became routine. Predictable. But this wasn't just cheating. This was manipulation. Grooming, even. Zayden knew what he was doing. He picked women who were successful but slightly restless. Women who weren't getting the attention they craved from home. And he used that gap like a crowbar. I asked Mira how long she'd known. She didn't hesitate. A year. Maybe more. But now I'm ready. Ready for what? I asked. She leaned in. To end it. Publicly. Something in her eyes changed when she said that. I suddenly realized Mira wasn't just doing this for justice or closure. She had a plan, and it had nothing to do with saving anyone's marriage. I didn't know if I was scared or impressed, but I knew one thing for sure. I was in too deep to back out now. Myra's plan was brutal. Not illegal, not violent, just precise. She had been quietly collecting proof for months. Texts, audio clips, screenshots, even internal messages from one of Zayden's employees who suspected he was using his business trips for more than mergers and branding deals. There were women. Multiple. None of them knew about each other until Mira reached out. Not for gossip, but for strength. She was going to confront Zayden. In public. With everyone present who mattered. Board members, investors, and most importantly, the women he used like disposable prototypes. And she wanted me there. At first, I said no. I didn't want to be part of some orchestrated humiliation, even if the guy deserved it. But Mira wasn't out for blood. She was out for truth. And she didn't need me for the drama. She wanted me to witness the end of the thing that had almost destroyed me. I went. It was a sleek, sterile conference hall. Business casual, glass walls, little fruit cups on silver trays. Zayden walked in late, of course. Confident, phone in hand, scanning the room like he already owned it. Until he saw Mira. And the others. And me. His face didn't crack, not fully. But his eyes darted. And that was enough. Mira didn't yell. She didn't raise her voice once. She simply laid out the truth, clean and undeniable, like evidence in a courtroom. Nobody shouted. Nobody cried. It was just quiet, devastating honesty. Every woman spoke. Short, sharp, clear. One of them thanked Mira. Another apologized to the group. Zayden didn't say a word. He left before the last woman finished. And just like that, it was over. But that wasn't the ending. Not for me. The ending was a few weeks later, when Odette sat across from me in our living room and finally admitted everything. No excuses. No twisting. Just truth. She looked small. Not because she'd been caught, but because she finally saw the damage. I didn't yell at her either. I just told her the only thing I knew for certain. I still love the version of you I married. But I don't think you're her anymore. And I don't think I'm the same person either. She cried. I didn't. We separated peacefully. No screaming. No court battles. She moved in with her sister for a while. I stayed in the house. And something strange happened in the silence that followed. I started sleeping again. I started painting again. Not for class. For me. I reconnected with old friends, started taking care of the parts of myself I'd let go blurry in the background. I even started seeing a therapist, which I swore I'd never do. And now, months later, I'm okay. Genuinely. Mira and I still talk sometimes. Not often, just check-ins. She's doing fine. Stronger than ever. She left Zayden, sold her stake in the company, and opened a new design studio in Chicago. She named it after her grandmother. As for me, I don't feel like a victim anymore. I feel awake. Not bitter. Not angry. Just awake. The truth is, I didn't destroy anything. I didn't fight dirty or get revenge. I just stopped pretending. And sometimes, that's all it takes to rebuild. Please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all.